Welcome ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to my Wildstar video. I recently got access into the final beta week of Wildstar, and I wasn't actually going to do this video, but I decided in the end I would, because I actually want to give this game as much publicity as I can, because I actually think it is an amazing game. So please enjoy some of the highlights of my experience while I give you some of my thoughts and impressions of this upcoming MMO. So I'm going to quickly look at the pros and cons, but I'm only going to be brief about it for two reasons. One, I don't want to bore you to death, and two, I didn't really get to play that much of it. I probably played anywhere between 5 to 10 hours and I only got to level 15, so I didn't really get to experience a lot of the game, but I will go over what I did get to experience. So let's first of all talk about the visuals, because everybody's going to have a very strong opinion of this. The visuals are very cartoony, and it's very deliberate. It really does feel, and I actually have to admit, I liked this fact, that I actually felt like I was playing inside a Saturday afternoon cartoon. I think they did a fantastic job on making this feel comical, and it is meant to be reasonably comical. It's a serious game, but it's able to poke fun at itself, and I think the way they did some of that was by not taking the visuals seriously, by having a cartoony feel. That and the fact that a lot of the founding members of this game were former Blizzard employees, so they come from that WoW mindset, but they did it really well. I really enjoyed it. It lent itself well to the comedy that they have in a lot of the dialogue, and I just really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people out there really don't like this cartoony style or non-realistic. They prefer a realistic style, but I don't think the story would have worked as well if they tried to go too real. So as far as visuals go, I give that a massive thumbs up. I think they've done a really good job on that. Now, one of the interesting things I found with this game, especially for an MMO, was the combat style. It's not a lock-on target system, it's a point-and-shoot style system, but it has a telegraph, not just for the player but also for the NPCs in the game, which again I found really interesting. It was a really clever concept and interesting way to play the game. Now, some might say that it makes the game too easy, because if you can see the attack coming you can just avoid it. Yes, but a lot of the times you have to be able to dodge them, because if you don't, you get one-shotted. Well, I can imagine you will get one-shotted if you were, because this is a sandboxy game. You can just wander around the world within reason and wander into a level 15 area when you're level 10, which in my video, if I'm pretty sure I'll add some of it in, I actually did, and I got smoked. So being able to avoid a lot of these attacks is quite handy, but also some of these attacks you can't actually dodge. You see them coming, but you don't actually have time to get out of the way. But what it did do was it just gave a different level of experience within the game, as far as I'm concerned. It made it different enough to be interesting, and I actually really enjoyed the telegraph system. Even from a casual gamer's point of view, or someone who doesn't get to play a lot of these games, it made it easier for me to control my character, because I knew exactly where my attacks were going to end up, rather than just spraying and praying. So the roles were quite interesting in this game, because they're not like a traditional old MMO where you had one set role where you would just be a tank or a DPS. They're actually a dual role system. So you can't be all things like ESO, but you can be either a DPS or a tank. Or with others you can be a healer or a DPS, and so on and so forth. So they do actually have dual role, so it gives you a little bit of diversity without being too expansive, which can make the game more interesting as far as I'm concerned. It gives you a little bit more flexibility, and especially when you group up with random people in the world, you're not fixed to one role and have a group full of tanks. You can quite easily mix it up just by changing a few skills. So the last thing I want to look at as a pro is the questing. Again, I didn't spend a lot of time with it, but the time I did spend, I had a heck of a lot of fun questing. And that's all I got to do. I didn't get to do any dungeons, I didn't get to do any PvP, I just quested, and I rushed it as much as I can so I could get as far into it as I could before the time ran out. And it was really interesting. I had so many different things to do. Now, with your character you have a main storyline, so depending on what faction you choose out of the two, you're going to have a slightly different story, and then you also have a path, which is not only a slightly different set of skills that you can acquire, but also a different set of quests that you can acquire within the game. So for my character, I played the assault path, so there were these assault quests that I could pick up as I quested through the land, as well as the normal main storylines and all these sub-storylines and so on and so forth. And even within those storylines, unlike a lot of other games I've played, it's not the same thing where you go in, you pick a task, you go in, you beat up some creatures, you collect some resources, and then you come back and hand it all in. There were different things, like you would actually have to become a robot spider, or you had to defend an area from attacking players, or you would have to go and attack other players. And there were so many different things that I could see this being a constantly interesting game. Now I'm going to get onto the cons, and to be honest with you, this is a stretch because I didn't really consider this a con, and again, I didn't have a lot of experience with it, but considering it was a beta game, or in beta, so it wasn't the full release version, the only problem I could foresee happening with this game is it could get visually confusing. And I attribute that to the fact that a lot of the skills, and not from my experience, but from what I've seen in other people's videos, is that some of the skills can be quite visually full, I guess, is for lack of a better word. There's a lot going on when they perform their skills. Combine that with all the telegraphs that go on, not just from the players but from the enemy, I can see this getting visually confusing, and me personally, being an older gamer, maybe that's the problem. For the younger gamers out there, maybe their reaction times and their ability to separate all the flashing out so that they can tell what they're doing, it may be easier for them, but for me, I could quite easily find myself lost within all of this visual chaos. But that is only a perceived problem, it's not an actual problem. I don't know if that will happen, and again, I was stretching to find something wrong with this game because I loved it. So that begs the question, will I play this game? Well, no, I'm not going to play this game, but for no other reason than I can't afford to pay for a subscription. This game is a hardcore MMO, so I understand why they have a subscription, because there is a lot of content in here, and if these guys run it anything like the Blizzard team do, they will have a lot of updates, and there will be a lot that will come for this game, which is exciting because there's already a lot in this game. They do have, however, aside from a subscription system, they actually have a cred system, which I'm actually going to follow because I'm going to find this very interesting, but I personally don't think it will work very well. Now, the way it works is, for those of you who don't know or haven't checked it out, you can grind in the game and collect in-game currency, and then use that currency to, on a market, I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I assume there will be a marketplace where you can go and buy real-world subscriptions that other players have brought and are now selling for in-game currency. Now, I don't know how much grinding you're going to have to do, but I would imagine that somebody who has spent real-world money on a subscription isn't going to give it up very easily. So I could imagine you would have to spend a heck of a lot of time grinding in order to collect enough in-game currency to buy one of these subscriptions. And I imagine there will be a marketplace where people will be driving up the prices, or well, not so much driving up the prices, but from what I've seen in other games, I can see the market becoming imbalanced and the price of a subscription going through the roof to the point where only a handful of people can actually afford it. And as a casual gamer, I can't see myself ever getting enough game time in order to get enough in-game currency to buy a subscription, which is really sad because I really would love to play this game. So I've got everything crossed that this eventually goes the way of most other MMOs and becomes a free-to-play game, because I will jump straight into it. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you enjoyed the commentary as well. If you did, please subscribe, as I will be doing more videos. The next video I will be doing will actually be another beta access game, but I will also be doing some playthrough games of free-to-play games. If you haven't seen my introductory video, what I want to do is I want to see if free-to-play games can be enjoyable as a purely free-to-play game. So join me next time as we venture through the world of free-to-play and beta access, and see you then. Thanks.